There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're expecting kind of a large group this evening, so I'm going to give folks a couple minutes to kind of trickle in, and then we'll start with some announcements about upcoming events and current Golden Eagle Audubon events, and then we'll turn it over to our presenter. But seeing a lot of people join the call. Welcome, everybody. And I see a lot of familiar names in the webinar or on the attendees list. So hi, everybody. I know a lot of you already, but for those of you who don't know me, my name's Adriel Abdel. I'm the education specialist and volunteer coordinator for Golden Eagle Audubon Society. I'm the only staff member, and I've been away for a few months because I had a baby in September, but I'm back. So it's really good to see all of you and be back helping facilitate some of our events. So before we get started, I do want to make a couple quick announcements just kind of about Zoom and the format for tonight, and then I'll jump into some announcements about upcoming events, and then I'll turn it over to Lucian to get started with the presentation. I know a lot of you have been to Audubon Zoom events before, but in case it's been a while or it's new for you, I do want to mention that the only people that you'll be able to see or hear throughout the webinar tonight are either myself or our presenter, Lucian. Everybody else will be muted and have their video turned off. However, if you need to communicate with us, you can do that by utilizing the chat feature. So if you look at the bottom of the Zoom screen, there's an icon bar and there is a chat icon. So if you're having any questions throughout the presentation, like technical difficulties or have a question for Lucian, you can just go ahead and type those in the chat box, and I'll kind of be keeping tabs on the chat throughout the presentation so it can help you with anything that comes up. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention is we are going to record the presentation tonight. And what we're doing now is we're recording our monthly programs and then uploading them to the GES YouTube station or channel, and also having them linked to our website. So if you need to leave early or know someone who would like to watch this presentation, that recording should be up in the next few days on our website. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our announcements. So let me just quickly share my screen. Hopefully that works. So privacy difference. So I'll be able to do this without sharing my screen, I suppose. Oops, actually, it looks like that's working. There we go. So one thing that I wanted to quickly update everyone on is an exciting event we have going on throughout the month of January, which is our 2022 Winter Bird Challenge. So if you're not familiar with the Winter Bird Challenge, we've done it for the past few years, and it's a friendly community competition when we challenge people to see how many bird species they can observe throughout the month of January. And it's been a lot of fun this year, and the results have been updated pretty much daily since it started in January. And so I wanted to quickly update people on what the current stats are and who the leaders are in the challenge. Just some quick numbers is we have 22 people participating this year, and they're located all throughout Southern Idaho. We have people, of course, participating in the Treasure Valley, but we also have people who live in Twin Falls, Emmett, the Wood River Valley, and kind of all throughout South Idaho. So I want to quickly update you on the competition and how it's going, because it's almost over. It will end on January 31st. And we will see who prevails as the winner in each category. So there are actually 3 different categories. There's a species category, or just a general category, which is just number of species observed. And then there's a photography category, so number of species photographed, and then an audio category, which is, I think, number of species recorded, their vocalizations. So let's pull up the results currently. Like I said, we have 1 week to go till the final results are in, but this is for the general category. And I don't know if you can tell in this graph here, but we have a real nail biter between first and second place Louisa and Cheryl are pretty neck and neck. I think Louisa has a slight edge by a species or two over Cheryl. And I don't know if you can also tell on this graph that they've observed about 145 species just this January since the beginning of the year, which I think personally is pretty astounding. And I love that it really shows, I think we have this misconception that winter is a really kind of boring time to go birding and you don't see a lot of variety. And this just really shows that that's not really true and that you can see a great diversity of birds in these winter months. There's also the current stats from the photography category. So Kent has photographed almost 100 species, very impressive. And then in the audio category, Louisa is currently leading that as well. So this has just been a ton of fun. Like I said, we've done it for a few years and it's a great way to encourage people to get out kind of during these dreary, cold winter months and kind of socialize a little bit. It's been a lot of fun because people who are participating in the challenge, there's a weekly Zoom social hour, which I hear are a lot of fun and people really love it. So it's just been a great way to kind of get together and get outside and enjoy a little bit of friendly competition. So I do have the link to the results. They are being posted and updated pretty much daily on the website. So if you want to follow along this coming week and see who wins each of the categories, you can click on that link there. I also wanted to recognize and thank Dondi Black, who has been organizing and leading the challenge. She's put a ton of work into it, updating the results daily, almost daily, and leading the weekly social hours and encouraging people to participate. So thanks to Dondi for putting on this great event, and thanks to everybody who's been participating this year. And if you didn't do it this year, we hope to see you next January. I also want to mention a couple other upcoming events and field trips we have in the near future. So one that we have coming up that's pretty exciting is a workshop series with Nathan Peplow. And if you're not familiar with him, he is the author of the Peterson Guide to Bird Sounds. And so he's going to do kind of a two-part series. So each series has two classes. So the first session is called A Shared Vocabulary for Bird Sounds. And those are going to be on February 8th and February 15th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. And to register for those two classes, it's a $35 fee. There's also the second session is called Beyond Beginning Earbirding, which will take place on February 24th and March 3rd, also at 7 p.m. on Zoom. And those two classes will also be a $35 package. If you're interested in enrolling in all four sessions, we have a slight discount, so you can register for all four for $60. But it should be a really informative, great workshop. And so you can find the details on how to register and pay your registration fee on our website. As well as some upcoming field trips. It's not on the slide, but the Idaho Young Birders Club, which Lucian co-created and leads, is going to have a February 6th field trip at 9 a.m. at Esther Simplot, and Lucian's going to talk a little bit more about that in the beginning of his presentation. We also have our Wednesday morning Birders Club has a session coming up on February 9th in the afternoon from 1 to 4 p.m. and they're going to meet at Catherine Albertson Park. We also have a birding by ear session on February 10th, which will be at Hulls Gulch from 9 to 11 a.m. And I did want to note that these sessions are pretty small. They're capped at 5 participants. So if you're interested in signing up, I would encourage you to do that sooner than later. And then we have a kind of all-day field trip in the near future, heading out to Hagerman Wilderness Management Area, which will be from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And if you're not familiar with where Hagerman WMA is, it's about 90 minutes southeast of the Treasure Valley. It's kind of heading out towards Twin Falls. And it's a really great winter bird haven. So it should be a ton of fun and a great excursion if you're looking for getting a little bit out of town this winter. And then if you are more of a beginner birder or you know someone who's more of a novice birder, we have our monthly beginners bird walk at the Bething Church River Trail, which will be on February 13th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. So we'd love you to come to any or all of these events. And I wanted to remind you that we are requiring online registration for our field trips and events. So you can head to our website, goldeneagleaudubon.org, and find further details and sign up and also see other classes that we have coming up in the near future. So that is all I have for announcements. And I would like to turn it over to Lucian. I'm going to briefly introduce him. I know a lot of you know Lucian. He has been very active in the local birding community for some time. He has been on the Golden Eagle Audubon board since 2020 and is the founder of the Idaho Young Birders Club, also a current Boise State University student. And like I said, just a really active member. You're also coordinator of the Christmas bird count, right? Or help with the Christmas bird count. And active in a lot of different realms in the birding world. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Lucian, and thank you so much for doing our presentation tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Adra. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Get this going. Yeah, so today I'm going to be going over just kind of an introduction to eBird, how and why to use eBird, going over the eBird review process, and then finally just looking at some fun features that eBird has that are less at the core of what eBird's doing with citizen science and more just like some cool bonus features that you can check out. So who am I? As Adra said, my name is Lucian Davis. I am currently a junior at Boise State University, studying biology with an emphasis in ecology, evolution, and behavior. And I'm planning to go into some sort of conservation work focused on birds. In 2020, I started the Idaho Young Birders Club, which is a group for younger birders. Our age range right now is sort of 12 to 25. We have membership open to ages 18 to 25. And this group is just aimed at kind of creating a community for younger birders. We do field trips. We have a pretty active Instagram account where we also do some educational posts there, stuff like that. Our next field trip, as Adra mentioned, is February 6th at Esler Simplot Park at 9 a.m. And those field trips are intended for people in our age range, so that like 12 to 25. But of course, adults are welcome to accompany younger kids. Yeah, and then, so my background with eBird, I have been using eBird for a few years. This year, I started helping Heidi Ware Carlisle with eBird Review for the regions that she reviews, which is Ada County, Boise County, Elmore, and Canyon County. And so I am still pretty new to eBird Review, so I apologize if I can't answer absolutely all of your questions, but I do plan to kind of go over what the eBird review process is and also how you can use eBird most effectively to make sure that you aren't getting contacted by reviewers all the time. So yeah, so okay. So we'll start just kind of with general, what is eBird and why you should use it. So I'm going to start with playing eBird's intro video because I think it's a really good kind of introduction, and they say it better than I could. So please let me know if the sound or video doesn't work.
Hey, Lucian, the sound is not coming through. There's closed captions, but the audio is not. At least on my end, and a couple people chatted that they couldn't hear it.
Okay. Oh, I'm not sure what to.
Yeah, because it looks like the volume's turned on in YouTube.
Yeah.
Were people able to read the closed captions that were turned on?
I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute and see if I can do something with the sharing settings, but I don't think I can. Okay, we can read the captions unless I have the chat in front of it. Okay, I am gonna try again and hopefully the captions will work. Oh, okay. Actually, I think I may have solved it. Okay, I'm gonna play just a couple seconds and then pause and see if the sound works.
Yep, that sounds good.
Awesome.
Yep.
Every day, millions of people around the world enjoy watching birds and recording their sightings.
What if there were a way to take all of these observations, yours, ours, everyone's, and put them all in one place?
If we could do this, we would fundamentally transform not just birding, but science and conservation.
From this idea emerged Ebird. Put simply, Ebird is a way for anyone around the world to store their birding observations, their photos, their sound recordings, and make them available to educators, scientists, and birders. It's incredibly easy to use, and it's incredibly powerful. All you do is let us know where you went birding, when, how far you traveled, and what you saw. It's powerful because hundreds of thousands of people all around the world are doing it, and it's growing. Ebird already safeguards 500 million sightings, information that allows all of us to understand the movements and needs of birds at global scales. Ebird maintains your lists for you and shares them with other birders from around the world. By sharing, it's now possible for anyone, anywhere, to find your target birds and the best birding hotspots any time of the year. Before Ebird, there was no way to comprehensively understand population-level movements of many species. By combining your sightings with remote-sensed habitat data from NASA, we're able to generate species distribution models that provide an unparalleled view of where and when birds are in the landscape. Scientists and students all over the world are now able to use Ebird datasets for their research at a variety of spatial scales. These observations help inform better conservation strategies, opening the door to the future of bird conservation. And this is just the beginning. With the help of millions of people who come to Ebird each year, we are creating a free, open access system that is easy to use, fun, and rewarding. Rewarding for birders, for scientists, for conservationists, and ultimately the birds themselves. Go to ebird.org or download Ebird Mobile to get started, all for free. By joining Ebird, you're joining a global team of people that share your passion for birds. Be a part of it.
All right, so that's Cornell's intro. I think it's a pretty good overview. Ebird is, move my screen a little bit. Ebird is the largest community science program in the world. It's a platform for reporting and viewing bird sightings and a platform for keeping your life list, your year list. It can keep pretty much every list that birders commonly keep, you know, also county, even down to month. You can get really specific with all this these lists, which is really great. And it's also a free resource for learning about birds across the world, which I'll get into a little bit more towards the end of the presentation, some of the tools that eBird has for learning about birds. So why should you use it? Well, all of these reasons. Instead of having to keep, maybe a paper list when you're out birding, and then I know a lot of people will do something like that and then like go and put it into a spreadsheet at home. You can do it all in eBird. eBird keeps all of these lists for you, and you can download your lists from eBird to a spreadsheet if you prefer to see them that way, or just keep them in eBird. So it's a really great organization system. You can also get all this really specific information about your lists that would just be overwhelming to keep by hand. You can see what's the greatest number of individuals of this species I've seen, for example. All these different kinds of things that you might not think to record just on your own, or just might not have time for. eBird's going to have all that data for you. In addition to that, like I mentioned, it's one of the largest community science programs in the world. So by using eBird, you are contributing to this huge data set that researchers can use to learn more about bird populations, migration. It has conservation applications, all kinds of things. So now I'm going to go kind of into a little like quick how-to of using eBird. I want to mention here, eBird has a lot of resources that are free to help people learn how to use it. So there's the free eBird Essentials course that I actually recently took for my ornithology course. I can attest that it's a really great course. It takes about half an hour to 45 minutes, and that gives you an introduction to using eBird. So if you're watching this now and then go on to take the course, there's going to be a little bit that's repeat, but I tried to make sure not everything was. But yeah, that's another great resource. And then there's also just, eBird has a variety of articles, and I am going to mention a few of them on, checklist protocols, counting birds, stuff like that. So there's a lot of information out there for you to use if you still have questions after this presentation. So Ebird app versus website. The Ebird app is an app that you can download on your phone. Pretty much any phone supports it. And that's a really great way to make a checklist while you're out birding. So you can open up the app, start a checklist. It's going to track everything, and we're going to watch another video that goes into that. And then it also has some other, so you can see checklists you've made. You can do some of the sort of explore regions features that you can get on the website, and then you can also look at some of your statistics. The website has all of that minus the checklist tracking feature, as well as a bunch of additional information. So this is where you can really get a lot of information on specific bird species. You can go a little bit more into depth about your lists. You can look at some of the science that eBird has produced. You also can submit lists through the website, and that's a great way. That's a great thing to do if you want to submit lists from before you were using the app. It's a little easier to do on the app because it's already tracking your distance and time. But yeah, if you don't want to be using an app while you're out birding, you can also go into the website and submit after that. So creating a checklist. I thought about trying to film my own little like screen share of this on my phone, but eBird has their own video and it's really great. So we're just going to watch that.
With eBird Mobile, birding has never been easier. This free mobile app works anywhere in the world, helping you quickly enter checklists while keeping track of your exact birding route, letting you just enjoy the birds. When you first install the app, you'll need to download a pack of information on what birds are expected in your region. Bird packs let you get a precise list of birds for your area regardless of your internet connection. The app will suggest the best pack based on where you are, and you can download other packs through settings at any time. Now you're ready to start birding. Typically, you'll be entering a checklist in real time, so the app knows the date and time you're starting. I want to record my track, so I'll leave that on. Tracking is a great feature that allows eBird to fill in where you're birding, how far you travel, and how long you're birding for. It keeps track so you don't have to. All right, you're all set. Now click Start Checklist. When you start a checklist, eBird uses your current GPS location and your bird packs to provide a list of expected species that are likely to be in that area at that time of year. You'll fill in this checklist as you go. Once you've found a bird you know, by sight or sound, the fastest way to add it is to type right here in the quick entry bar. Let's start with 2 mallards out on the pond. Type the number of birds, 2, and the species, mallard. Then select the species from the checklist, and you're all set. It's that easy. Let's enter a few more sightings the same way. There's 5 Canada geese foraging in the grass. Sounds like there's a red-tailed hawk calling nearby. And there's an osprey eating a fish. And a great blue heron flying overhead. You can see all the birds you've already tallied by switching to the checked view. This is particularly helpful for adding more sightings to a species. For example, you see 3 more mallards. Tap the number 3 times and you're all set. You'll notice some birds have these icons next to their names. These show whether a bird is infrequently reported or unreported for that region and time of year. By tapping a species name, you can make changes to your tally or add comments about the bird's field marks, its behavior, the habitat you saw it in, or anything else you find interesting. This is especially important for those rare and unusual sightings. You can see where you've been by clicking here to review your track. When you're finished birding, tap Stop. If you have an active track, eBird will ask you if you're done birding. Tap Stop Track to confirm. Now it's time to review your checklist. The first thing you'll need to do is add your location. The best way to do this is to use the map. It's important to choose a location that accurately represents where you were birding. You can either choose an appropriate existing location or create a new location by tapping on the map. In this case, you are birding at Sapsucker Woods, so choose that location. Next is info about your birding outing. This is what makes eBird tracking great. Tracking has already defined your checklist type based on whether you were moving or stationary. Tracking also fills in the duration and distance traveled. You can change your checklist type and edit the other fields if you need to. Before you can submit, eBird asks if you're submitting a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify. Complete checklists are eBird's way of knowing you've identified and reported all of the birds you saw or heard to the best of your ability. It's not possible to detect every single bird. Nobody can do that. As long as you've listed all of the species you could identify, then check yes. You can also enter comments about your birding experience. You can document the weather, other animals you saw, or any other fun memories. Last, but not least, you can review the species you reported. When you're ready, click Submit. Congratulations, you're an eBirder. You're now part of the largest birding community in the world.
Okay, so yeah, that should be a pretty good overview of creating a checklist. Another thing I wanted to mention, so the video said with this, if you're marking the checklist complete or not. Oh no, it's playing again.
Merlin is a free app
Okay, let me
that
fix
uses
that,
5
sorry.
simple questions to identify the birds you find, providing real-time bird ID guidance right in the
Close that. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, that video noted that you can check that it's a complete checklist if you've identified all of the birds to the best of your ability. So that's something I really want to emphasize. You don't have to know every bird you see to be able to effectively use eBird. So you can submit it as a complete checklist as long as you've identified every bird to your ability. One thing that really helps with that is using what birders often refer to as SPUs on eBird. So you'll see if you go into eBird, it might have something like, you'll have your list of all your ducks, and then at the end it'll say duck SPA, and that's SP period. That's short for species, duck species. So that's a great tool to use if you're like, well, okay, I know I saw this duck, but I'm not sure which one it is. And so that way you can be reporting every individual bird you saw, even if you didn't identify them all down to species. And there's things like duck SPA, hawk SPA. There's also more specific ones, like, for example, if you know that you saw one of the ducks in the Ithia genus, so that's like ring-necked, greater or lesser scaup, canvasback, redhead, you saw one of those, but you're not really sure which one, that's often an option on eBird. So there's stuff like that. So when you're getting started out birding, that's a really great tool to use. And I would encourage everyone to kind of get an idea of what those options are, and use them when appropriate. And it's also something that it's not just a when you're started birding thing. I still use those SPUs all the time for, difficult goals, or just a bird that I didn't see very well, or a call that I heard really briefly fly over. It's like, well, I know that was a songbird, but I'm not sure which one. So I'm going to use passerine SPA, which is the option for just some sort of songbird, which comes from the order that songbirds are in is Passeriformes. So another thing that was not very thoroughly covered in that video was counting birds. So in that example, the observer was seeing like, oh, here's 5 mallards, here's 1 osprey. What do you do if you see something like this? This really intimidates a lot of birders, especially who are getting started eBirding. If you'd been birding previously and hadn't ever worried about counting birds, and now eBird's asking you to, that's kind of intimidating, especially when you're seeing big flocks like this. So eBird has a really great article on this that I would encourage everyone to read if you want to look into this more. I'll just kind of give a brief overview. What you want to do when counting big groups is don't actually count every individual bird. You'll count a smaller group and then sort of extrapolate from there. So with this group, I can see these birds are all seem to be fairly evenly distributed. Of course, it looks like there's more of them in the back. It's just because they're farther away. That's also something that you kind of have to adjust for mentally as you're counting. But you can say like, okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. So I know in this flock, this is what 5 birds looks like. And then 5 might be good if you have a flock of, say in the like 50 to 100 range. If you have a flock of thousands of birds, you might want to say like, okay, I'm going to count up to 5 individuals. Then I'm going to go count in 5s, looking at like, that's a chunk of 5, that's a chunk of 5, that's a chunk of 5 until I get to 100, and then see, okay, this is what a chunk of 100 looks like. And then go from there, 100, 200, 300, until you get a good estimate of the whole flock. So that's the basics of how to do it. You can adapt it for whatever birding situation you're in. Another thing I want to mention, eBird has this option for when you can't count birds. Instead of putting in a number, you can put in X. That is an option. I want to challenge people to not use it as much as possible. The reason being, what that X tells eBird is that species was present. There could have been 1, there could have been 10,000. eBird has no idea if you just put an X in. And so as much as you can, you want to try and get an estimate. You really don't need it to be that precise. you want the estimate to be to your best ability and not wildly off, but it can even be, say you have a flock of 1,000 birds, but you overestimate a little bit and estimate it to be 2,000. Even that is better than putting an X, because what that's telling eBird is there's a lot of birds here. So yeah, it really doesn't need to be that precise. So I would encourage everyone to, as much as you can, not use those X's and use an estimate instead. And just, try not to get overwhelmed if you're starting counting by trying to get the most accurate count as you can, because it's really more about, is this a good, decent estimate of the birds to the best of your ability, not did you count every single individual bird? Because eBird is aware that that's not possible. And if you're worried about, skewing the data that researchers use, I would say researchers who are using eBird data are aware that the counts are, for the most part, imprecise. If they're doing a study where they need like exact down to the species counts, they're going to be using a different data source. So I wouldn't let that intimidate you away from trying to count.
Lucian,
okay.
I had a quick question. We had a question, kind of a fun question come in. How many geese do you estimate are in this photo?
That's a good question, and I should have estimated them before I put it in to see, but maybe I can show, because I think you guys should be able to see my mouse, so I can show how to do it with this photo. It's tougher with a photo than in real life. But so we have like, I'm going to choose kind of like a middle distance here, and it'll be tough, but we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So like this little group is like 10. So then we could do like 10, maybe that's like 20, 30, 40. I can't see well enough to estimate all those guys back there, but this is a few hundred here.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I was curious, do you have an opinion? Do you think it's better to overestimate or underestimate?
I think I tend to go for underestimate, or maybe not so much underestimate, but I tend to go with what I would call the most conservative count. So it's like, say you see, while you're out birding, you see a raven 5 times. 3 of those times are one bird just passes over and you don't see it again. Or you don't think you see it again. Another time this bird's coming from like another direction, or maybe the next 2 times our bird's coming from another direction, or you see a bird just kind of flying around. That's something that like, maybe, okay, I saw those 3 birds pretty separately. I don't think those were the same birds. I didn't see anyone come back, so I'm going to do at least 3. The other 2 I saw them come back, so maybe there were just 3. Probably there were 5 individual birds. That's the sort of thing what I mean with like conservative count. And that's good for smaller groups. With huge groups like this, it doesn't matter quite as much if it ends up being an undercount or an overcount.
That makes sense. Thank you. That's
Yeah.
very helpful.
And another thing with that, with counting birds, if you're on a trail where you're going out and eBirding, you're going and walking a trail and then walking back, you have to be careful with that, not to double count birds. So say you walk out to the trail, there's a tree with a red-tailed hawk in it, and then you come back and you see the same hawk in that tree. You're not going to put 2, you're just going to put 1. So you're trying to capture individual birds, not how many times you saw a bird. And that's also the same thing with distance. So you walk out on a trail, if you're doing this on eBird mobile and tracking it, say the trail is a mile long, so you walk out a mile, back a mile, the track is going to say 2 miles. You want to edit that to be 1 mile, so that you're not doubling up on your distance. So it's unique distance. When you're not, usually we don't walk in a straight line, so you just kind of do your best to estimate what was actually unique distance. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about, which this video talked about a little bit, choosing a checklist protocol. If you're using eBird mobile, it will select a protocol for you. Sometimes you'll have to edit that. Usually you won't. For most situations, you're going to be using stationary or traveling checklists. This is when birding was your primary purpose. So you're actually going out birding. You didn't just notice a bird. And then if you're using eBird mobile, it's just going to, if you go over a certain distance, it's going to automatically put it as a traveling checklist. If you don't move very much, it's going to be a stationary. One thing to be careful of, if you have especially like stationary checklists for a long time, the app can get a little bit wonky, and if you move around a very small distance, but like, maybe you walked around the same like 0.05 miles, that should still probably be a stationary checklist, but the app might put it as traveling. So that's also just something to keep in mind. Then there's some of these other checklist protocols. So the incidental, I actually use this all the time. If I just happen to notice a bird, I don't have time to do a full checklist, but I just want to note like, oh, hey, that was a cool bird that I saw. I'll often, like, if I'm out on long drives with birding friends and we see a bird, the person who's not driving will be like, oh, why don't we go and incidental that bird? So that's the protocol to use anytime that you just sort of happen to see a bird and want to get it into your checklist. eBird does recommend, if you can, turn an incidental into a small stationary. So if you see a notable bird that you want to put on a checklist and you have some time, it can just be like 5 minutes and report all the birds that you see in that 5 minutes and turn it into a stationary checklist. And then that's more valuable data for eBird. And even those super small checklists like that are valuable because this is still more data, and it's a good sort of snapshot of like, oh, there's enough birds around that in just 5 minutes you can see this, or there's not very many birds around, you saw this one species in that 5 minutes. So it is helpful, even just those super short checklists. And then so there's also this historical protocol. This can be used to document birding that you did in the past when you can't remember details. So maybe you can't remember the exact time. Maybe it has to be a more general location. You can't remember how far you traveled, stuff like that. So then you can use that historical checklist to put those birds in so that you have them in your lists. The historical protocol is also one place where I would say, like, no problem if you use X's, because if you weren't counting birds in the paper list or whatever it is that you did keep, then instead of just making up a guess, you can just put the X in for that historical. So yeah, that's I think a lot of why eBird has that option, because it's good for people to use for historical checklists. And it also just, even though it's not ideal to use the X, it does remove a barrier for people who might otherwise be like, I'm not going to use eBird because I don't want to count birds. So there's that. There's also these other protocols. So some of the more uncommon protocols are the banding protocol, the pelagic protocol, nocturnal flight call. These are all for specialized types of birding. The banding protocol is the one that we use while banding birds. So I do songbird banding with Intermountain Bird Observatory, and we do checklists with this protocol, which allows us to report the birds that we banded. The reason that it's a different protocol is because the detectability of birds is different when you're banding. When you're actually, capturing and releasing these birds, you're detecting a lot more than you would if you're just, spent a little bit of time walking around. And so that it requires a different protocol. That also means if you visit a banding station, which I would encourage you to visit one of the Intermountain Bird Observatory banding stations, and you want to eBird your visit, you need to use the banding protocol so that you're accurately representing the kind of effort that was put in to seeing those birds. Pelagic Protocol is used for pelagic birding trips, so that's trips out onto the ocean to see seabirds. That's because traveling counts, they want you to cap them at 5 miles. So if you go over 5 miles, you should start a new checklist. If you're on a pelagic, that's just not feasible because you're going to be traveling like 40 plus miles. And so they'll do a few checklists that are longer than that. And then stuff like that. So those are protocols that basically for the most part, you'll know if you need to use them. But they are there for some of those things where detectability is different or you can't really follow the normal rules. Okay, so there's a question. Can you report owls heard at night? And if so, how? Yes, absolutely. You can report birds seen as well as heard. And that's not any problem. And it's basically just the same as what you're doing daytime birding. Stationary, it's going to be a stationary checklist. If it's traveling, it's going to be a traveling. Ebird does actually note those checklists at night as nocturnal. And that's because you're not detecting as many birds on a nocturnal checklist. So that way Ebird knows that like, oh, I shouldn't take this checklist to mean there's not any birds there. So yeah, you can just report those like normal. Okay, and then adding media to checklists. This is unfortunately something that you can't do in Ebird Mobile right now. I know it's something that they know is going to be a good thing to add, so I think it will happen eventually. It's not possible right now, so I'm going to briefly show you how to do that. So to add media, you're going to go on to the desktop version. You'll go, you could go through My Ebird. You could also just go here to click on your checklists from My Stats. And then so we take like this checklist from this morning. There's already some media in this checklist. I don't have my own media to add, so I'm not actually going to add any. But if I were going to, I would go here to manage media and then click add media, and then you can upload the file from there. So yeah, that's how you do that. It sucks that you can't do it on the mobile app, but I think it will happen eventually, hopefully soon. So finally, reporting sensitive species or individuals. So Ebird has a few different ways to do this. Some species are automatically flagged as sensitive. So in Idaho, that's great gray owl, northern hawk owl, yellow-billed cuckoo, and gyrfalcon. The owls and the cuckoo are marked as sensitive because they are really sensitive to disturbance, especially nesting. Gyrfalcon is because they can be targeted and trapped by falconers. And so that's something that Ebird wants to keep those birds hidden, so it's not quite as easy to just go out and capture, every gyrfalcon that's found in populated areas. So what that means, them being designated sensitive by Ebird, individuals can't find specific locations for these birds. So you can still report them. It's going to note on the checklist that it's sensitive, but you, as a birder trying to look for a place to find the species, you can't get a specific location. You can get a general location where they've been reported, but nothing specific enough for you to actually go out and see that individual bird. If you want to report a bird that is not one of these species, but that you don't want to share that information publicly, this could be because, say, you found an owl nest that you want to report, but you don't want people to go and look at, because even, some of the other owls aside from this species are also going to be sensitive to disturbance. And there's some other, it's kind of a case-by-case basis, and you should use your best judgment on if you think that that bird is going to be really harmed if people come and look for it. some things to take into consideration are, is this a species that's really sensitive to disturbance? Is this a rare species or just one that's really sought after by birders? So a lot of people are going to go looking for it. And then maybe it's on private property and it's a rare species. So you want to make sure that people don't go and trespass, stuff like that. So you can hide the checklist. That's one option. And that's another option just in eBird. I think that's another thing that you have to go do on the website. You can just go to the checklist and there'll be an option for that. The one thing about that is that removes the checklist from public output, which also means it removes it from eBird's data pool. So then that checklist is just used for your personal list building. eBird isn't getting data from it. So what I would suggest you do if you want to do that is hide it, and then maybe a few months later, when you're not worried about that bird anymore, unhide the checklist, so then that data is available again. But maybe it's after breeding season, chicks have fledged off the nest, so there's no longer a threat from people knowing the exact location. The other option is to pin the location at an imprecise point. So this is something that I've done doing field work with short-eared owls when we've had a short-eared owl nest, where I want to eBird it because I want that data in eBird, and I also want it for my own list. But I don't want to share the nest location for that bird. So I would put the pin maybe like a mile away and I usually make a note that this is an imprecise pin, partially just so people don't waste their time going to look for it because they know that they aren't actually going to the exact spot. The one thing to make sure when you do that is you're putting it in the same habitat and not too far away. So only a couple miles needs to be in the same habitat type. This is so your data isn't getting messed up, because from an eBird data perspective, it doesn't really matter if the short-eared owl nest is at this area of sagebrush right here or this area of the same sagebrush habitat a mile away, but that means that people can't find and disturb that nest.
Lucian, someone was asking, how specific can the information be? Like, could someone see exactly where you reported a bird, or is it kind of more the general location?
If it's not a sensitive species, you can see exactly where, and I'll actually show you guys how to do this because it's a really helpful thing if you're looking for specific birds. So yeah. Okay, another quick note, and then I'll answer maybe a couple quick questions about this section, but then I do want to move on into the next session. The Great Backyard Bird Count is coming up from February 18th to 21st. And this is just an event where you're encouraged to go and observe the birds in your backyard. It doesn't actually have to be in your backyard, but this is a great event to get a bunch of data on winter birds all at once. Now eBird has partnered with the organizers of the Great Backyard Bird Count. So any eBird checklist you submit during the count period automatically gets counted towards that data for that count. So you don't have to do anything extra. Checklists need to be 15 plus minutes. And then another thing I wanted to mention, you can share your checklists for the Great Backyard Bird Count with Golden Eagle Audubon Society, and it'll get put into a trip report. So there's this Google form for that I will see. I'm not sure what this, oh, that's not gonna work. Anyways, I'm not sure I can share the form.
Yeah, it's also on our website on the calendar, and I think it's in our latest e-blast if people want to find the link. Thanks for mentioning it.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so this is kind of the end of my section on how to use eBird. So I can answer a few questions now on that, but I do want to save the majority of them to the end because I have a few more things I want to talk about. So yeah, any quick questions now? If you have a longer question, then there'll be plenty of time at the end. And I'll just pause for a minute to let people type into the chat.
It doesn't look like we have any questions, Lucian. So whenever it looks like you're typing back to Ken, but whenever you're ready, we can move on, I think.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Okay. So now I want to go into eBird data quality and the review process, aka how to keep me out of your email inbox. So eBird maintains data quality through a few different means. A big one of these is the review process. So I am a regional reviewer for Ada, Canyon, Boise, and Elmore counties. I am mostly an assistant to the primary reviewer, Heidi Ware Carlisle, who's also the education director at Intermountain Bird Observatory. So eBird review is eBird's method of making sure that unusual sightings can be verified. And so this is done by volunteer regional reviewers like me. So people are covering counties. There are, especially in areas where there are less birders, people might cover a whole province or state, or there are even places where there is one person covering the whole country in areas where eBird isn't used as frequently. In the United States, it's mostly reviewers will have a few different counties that they're reviewing for. And so this is just kind of what my review page looks like. These are all, I know these things all say like unconfirmed. These are not all like birds that I don't believe in. They're just ones I haven't gotten to yet, or that Heidi and I haven't gotten to yet. So eBird, I became a reviewer basically just because I had heard Heidi talking about it and was like, oh, that seems interesting. So I talked to her about it. And she coordinated with some of the people who manage eBird review. It's entirely a volunteer position. There's a form that you can fill out on eBird, an interest form, if anyone is interested in becoming a reviewer, or you can contact one of the regional reviewers. So, the thing behind eBird review and also behind your sightings getting flagged are the regional filters. So these are set by the regional reviewers as a way to set parameters for what is normal for a species at that time of year and what is an exceptional observation that requires comments. So what you can see here, these numbers represent what is the minimum number you can put in without having to write comments. So emperor goose, super rare species in Ada County. You can't put any in without having to write comments. So that's what that 0 is for. And then snow goose, we can see this changes over the course of the year. So February through April is when they're passing through. This is Ada County. So we're not like the Canyon County filter is set for a lot more birds because Canyon County gets a lot more. And so you can see these kind of match the distribution of birds over the year. And these filters are updated basically as needed and as the reviewers have time. So what you see as an eBirder relating to these filters is these flags and then also these other little symbols here. So I want to explain what these symbols mean because it's not necessarily super intuitive. So anything that you put in that ends up highlighted in orange requires comments for submitting. This square with the R is a rare bird. So that's something that bird is either unusual for the area all the time or unusual at that time of year. So for example, right now, yellow-breasted chat is being flagged in Ada County because they're super unusual for winter. There's one here right now. So if you have rare bird alerts, you may have seen it. But birders have to put in comments to validate that sighting because it's so unusual for the time of year. The other thing that makes you have to write comments is if you have a high count. So that's this little diamond with the exclamation point symbol. And so that's if you see an unusual number of species. Ebird wants to make sure that or unusual number of individuals, not species. Ebird wants to make sure that that's an accurate count, especially with something like, we often estimate to tens. So if you put 50 in, it might be pretty easy to accidentally put 50 in when you really meant 5. So that's also something that's there for. It's just a check for you, like, oh, maybe I made a little entry error here. But yeah, those will require comments on just describing how you came to the conclusion that there were that many birds or that it was that species. And I'll get a little bit more into comments. These circles don't require comments. These are more of information for you on the rarity of a bird and just should be a prompt for you to check and make sure that that is correct. So the red means unreported. So that means it's unreported for that location. It's actually a little bit more specific than counties. So it's like the general area you're in. It doesn't necessarily update immediately. So like if a bird shows up in an area for the first time, but then a bunch of people are reporting it, it's not necessarily going to automatically make this thing go away. So that's something to keep in mind too. And then this is just infrequent. So these little things, you don't have to write a comment on them. They're not that exceptional. It's unusual enough that it should prompt you to, if you're, just getting started, to step back and be like, am I sure this is what it is? So that's what that's there for. So when you get this orange highlight, you have to write a comment. Let's talk about that. So first, writing comments for rare birds. So that's when there's that R symbol. This is what the comments or eBird reviewers are actually looking at to determine if they're going to confirm your sighting or not. And so it's really important to write a comment that accurately tells us, oh, is this a good description of this bird? Does this really sound like what this person saw, or do I need more information? So I want to show you some examples. And as you're looking at these, I want you to consider, as you're looking at these and as you're writing comments while you're eBirding, step back and consider, if I were a reviewer right now, would I be able to tell based on this comment that I wrote that is what the bird is? And so that's something that you always want to keep in mind when you're writing comments. So I have some examples of some comments that I really liked. I censored out the location and name and stuff just in case there's people on here that don't want their comments called out or anything like that. I also want to mention with these, I have these not so good comments. I think they're helpful for people to see. I do not hold this against the people who write them. That's, why I'm doing this today, because eBird doesn't give a lot of guidance on how to write comments. There are some articles on it, but it's not obvious. So I totally understand that it's not super intuitive. This is not to call anyone out, but I think it's helpful for you to see from my perspective, looking at this comment and be like, oh yeah, I don't really have any way to determine if that's really what was seen. So on this good comment section, if you can't read the text, I can read this out. It says, this is for 6 Dunlin. It says, continuing birds reported by Cheryl Huizinga and Denise Hughes on January 21st. Small, stocky shorebirds with black drooping bills, brown upper sides, and white underparts except for brown breast. Black legs, this is say feeding by probing into mud, smaller than killdeer. So we have information on, okay, there's shorebirds. That narrows it down a lot. Black drooping bills, that's a really good field mark for Dunlin. Also, we have brown upper sides, white underparts, that except for brown breast. So that should fairly well rule out Western sandpiper, which also has a black drooping bill, although not as dramatically, because they have a lot more streaking and it's not just like this nice even brown. So yeah, that's a pretty great comment. And then here's just another example for a common red poll: small streaky finch with red spot on crown, rosy breast, black mask, yellow bill. the observer also put in, what a surprise, which is, I mean, I think it's mostly just, a fun little comment to add in there. That kind of thing is actually helpful for reviewers because it signifies that that you do realize that that was an unusual bird, so you were paying special attention to it. The main thing you just want to look at is like, have I put enough information in here to determine, yes, it is that species and it's not the other more common species. Something with redpoll is like, maybe it was just a house finch, or if you're up higher elevation, a Cassin's finch. But this small helps, black mask really helps. So just making sure to add those definitive field marks in there. And we have our other comments here. This is for a Dunlin. Just says wading through a stream. Seems more like shorebird behavior than other bird behavior, but that's really not giving me enough information. And then with these white-winged crossbills, 6 male, 4 female. Again, that's giving some information. That's telling me that the person was paying attention to the birds, differentiating males and females, but there isn't any information there on how they were identified. So that's for rarity. And then also writing comments for high counts. This is something that's actually a little bit, I think, harder to do, and is still harder for me to do, to describe like, okay, how did I really make sure that this was a good count? But here's some good ways to do it. Mainly with this high counts is just describe your process. What did you do to come to that conclusion? And like I was saying before, eBird's not looking for extreme precision, which also means that I'm not scrutinizing this extremely heavily. It's mostly just from these comments, can I tell that this was a decent estimate of these birds? So here's a good one for 21 yellow-rumped warblers, which that's a pretty high number, so that trips the filter right now. Comment says tons along entire walk, added by 1s and 2s. Short, sweet, and it gets the information across that I need because I know how you counted them. Here's another example for birds that can't really be counted individually. So 350 Brewer's blackbirds. So this person described they counted individually to 100, and then they counted by 100s to get this estimate. Another good thing about this comment is that there is a short note about how they were identified. You don't always need to write that for high count trips, but it can be helpful because as a reviewer, I might look at that and think, oh, that's a ton of Brewer's blackbirds, but it wouldn't be a crazy amount of red-winged blackbirds. So what if they were confusing the two? So they added a note about the identification. So that can also be helpful. And then here's some comments that are not as helpful to me. So this is 90 common ravens. Comment just says at least. Basically, all that's doing is affirming that the person believes in their count. But what I would want is more information on how they got to that count. Even just something like there were a couple, really big flocks that flew over, that could be helpful. This one, I think, is just a case of the observer not knowing what kind of filter was being tripped here. So this is for 6 American tree sparrows. If you report any more than one, it's going to trip. And so the comment is rusty cap, bicolored bill, dark chest spot. This is a pretty good description. If this was tripping for species, it's tripping for count. So I would keep that description so I know that the bird was identified correctly, and then also add probably these were counted by 1s, so counted by 1s, or something like that, or good estimate of a small group. All right, so that's pretty much the basics on writing comments. Ebird also has an article on this that's pretty good and probably has some other good points, so I would encourage you to look into that too. Okay, so our final section, and I can take some questions about eBird review before this, is just going to be kind of exploring eBird, looking at some cool features that aren't necessarily essential, but will help you get more enjoyment out of this. I saved this to the end, so in case it goes long, you can leave now and watch the recording or whatever you want. So yeah, so this is more just for fun, but before that, are there any questions about the eBird review process I can answer? And then I also can do a lot more general questions at the end after we finish this little exploring section.
I just want to say thanks for going over kind of what goes on the reviewer end of things, because I know I personally have been very intimidated in the past to make like rare bird sightings on eBird. So now I feel a little bit more confident in just knowing the type of information I need to provide. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And that's also the opportunity to go over this process is a big reason why I wanted to do this presentation, because I think it's not something that a lot of eBirders know about. I hear a lot of people complaining about having to write comments when they don't know I'm a reviewer, which is kind of funny, and I don't hold it against people because I totally get it. It is intimidating. Before I became a reviewer, when I got my first email from a reviewer, I was like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. So I get it. And yeah, I think it's important to know what the process is so you understand. I mean, for one thing, that there's a person behind that looking at all of these comments, and we're just here to ensure eBird data quality. We're not here to like punish people. Another thing, if your sighting is unconfirmed on eBird, that doesn't take it off of your personal list. So if you do have a sighting that like you just couldn't get solid documentation for, and it happens rarely. One example that I'll give, last year, Jay Carlisle, who's the research director of Intermountain Bird Observatory, was out doing a yellow-billed cuckoo survey along the Snake River, and he saw a gold-billed tern, which it would be the first state record for Idaho, incredibly rare species. He's pretty sure that's what he saw. He couldn't get a photo or anything. With the just like extreme rarity of that, that's something that couldn't really be accepted without further documentation. So like we all know, like he's pretty certain that's what he saw. He's a super experienced birder. That's probably what the bird is, but it's just with something like that, you have to have more documentation. So that's also something that I just want to say, like, if you do have sightings that are unconfirmed, it won't take it off of your personal lists. It just means that for whatever reason, we couldn't get enough documentation for that to be used for research purposes. Okay, and then one question. When the numbers are flagged for a small number of birds, I often just put counted each individual. Is that satisfactory? Yes, definitely. That says the same thing to me as like counted by ones. So yeah, it's really with the counting is just, it's fairly simple. It's just describe your process for counting. And that really is what it is for the identification too. Just, if you're stuck on like, oh, how do I describe this bird? Just step back and think like, okay, how do I know this is what it is? Why is it? And just describe your thought process. So yeah, and if you get an email from a reviewer because that wasn't enough of a description, please don't be afraid. We're here to help. And we're not judging you for a misidentification or for not including enough information. So yeah, I want to make it as like unintimidating as possible. And it looks like there aren't any further questions about eBird review for now. So let's go into this exploring eBird. So I'm going to go into the website here. So eBird has a lot of cool features that you can use to find more birds, find more spots, look at your lists. So I'm mostly going to be looking at the Explorer feature, and then we'll take a look at the Science feature too. So explore species. You can put any species in here and get, for most species, some information. There's a few really rare species from areas that are underbirded that don't have accounts yet. But for the most part, you can. So let's look at snow goose. You can go into here, you can see photos. There's a quick description. You can see how many times you have observed this species. If you have photos and audio, you can see how many people have observed this species, all of that. You can also look at these weekly bar charts. So let's look for Ada County. Just check the chat real quick. I will save that last question for the end. I just want to make sure there weren't technical difficulties people were alerting me to. So anyways, with this bar chart, so this is showing the width of that darker blue bar is showing the frequency. So this is broken down into weeks. So you can see how the abundance of birds changes seasonally. You can also see, so this is what I was talking about when I was going over that those like sensitive species, and this is why you have to be careful with this. You can go in and see exact locations for birds. So this is the general map, and if I zoom out enough, you can see the range map for this species over the whole world. What's cool about these range maps, they're not quite as specific as, or they're a little bit harder to read, I guess, than the range maps that you'll usually get into a field guide, but they're updated automatically, so they're really current. So for this snow goose, this is probably going to match fairly well with the range map you're going to see in a field guide. As another example, let's look at Anna's hummingbird, if it will load. This is giving you a little bit finer scale data than what you're getting in a map. So if we zoom in on Idaho, most field guides right now, because they aren't updated, don't even have these as occurring in Idaho. But then we can zoom all the way into Boise and see, oh, actually, these guys are pretty common here now. And then if you zoom in far enough, well, maybe not common, but pretty frequent. If you zoom in far enough, you can see these individual pins. The ones with the little fire symbol are actual eBird hotspots. The ones in red are the recent ones, so they've been observed within the last 30 days. And then you can click on this and see that specific location. So this is a really great tool for you to find birds. So if you're like, oh, I really want to go see a snow goose, then you can use this and get a specific place to go to see them. But yeah, it is good to be aware that that data is available. You can also look at photos for the species here. You can look at audio, all kinds of things. And you can, another fun thing, you can change species. You can hit surprise me and it'll give you just a random bird from all the birds. So that's, if you're bored, I've done that before just to, learn about some new birds. From this, you can also, you can click through, and this is arranged in taxonomic order. So like you could click through all the tanagers if you want. So that's a good time waster if you ever need one. Another thing I want to show in the Explore feature, we can do Explore regions. So let's look at Ada County. This is going to show all the species observed here. How many birders have made checklists here? How many checklists have been made? The top hotspots in the region. You can see an illustrated checklist, and this has all the bar charts for that county with photos, if photos have been taken of that bird in the county, all kinds of stuff. And you can do this for, you can't go more specific than county level, but you can go a lot broader than that too. And then it's also going to show like the top 100, which there's another way to see that. So we'll look at that. Can also look through photos and sounds in Macaulay Library. So this is just opening everything, but we could look in, let's do Anna's hummingbird again. And so now you can see every single photo of an Anna's hummingbird that's been uploaded to Ebird. That is not an Anna's hummingbird. We'll flag that later. And that's actually something that maybe we can do this right now. I can show you guys. If there's something that's misidentified here, so it's possible that the person just put this in wrong. It's in California, so I'm not sure if that's a Rufus or an Allen's, but you can get these wrong species here. And then I'm just going to put.
Lucian, a question came in on who flags the photos like you're doing. Is that something that anyone can do if you see a photo you think is misidentified?
It's not something that anyone can do, but it's also not restricted to reviewers. You have to have submitted, I think it's 100 checklists in the previous year, but once you've done that, you can flag them. And that's just to make sure that the people who are flagging them are more frequent birders. So, you know, those are the people who are generally assumed to have more knowledge, so you aren't getting new people flagging things that are actually correct. What happens after that media gets flagged is it goes into the queue of whoever is the reviewer for that region.
Thank you. That's helpful. And then another question, I was typing the answer, I think I'll just let you answer it, is how can you tell what birds other people have seen, like specific people, like if you have a buddy that you want to see what their recent checklists are?
Yeah, so if they're they have selected that you can see their recent checklists, then you can see that. There isn't a good way to search profiles. What I usually do, and I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it, is I go pretty much everyone who I want to like look at what they've seen recently is someone who I've had a checklist with recently. So I go and find a checklist that was with them and click on their profile from there. So I'm going to do this for Heidi because I know that she would be okay with it. So I go in there, I can click on her profile, and then I can see her recent checklists. But yeah, you can't do that for everyone.
Yeah, and there's like a way to have contacts so that you can like share checklists with people. So if you go birding with somebody else, there's a way for you to share your checklist with them. Like for example, anytime GAS does a field trip, we make an eBird list and that can be shareable with other people. And then just like Lucian said, you can always say if you're looking at a certain area, if you want to see what birds were in Barber Park recently, you'll see the checklist and the name of the person associated with that checklist. Hopefully that answered the person's question.
Yeah.
And then going back to the photo question, if someone just put up a photo and it's wrong, who would know is the question.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So if you put up an incorrect photo for a species that isn't flagged, in theory, no one would know, unless someone happens to come across it. There's a few different ways that people can come across it. One of them actually I can show right now. Ebird has these quizzes, which is how most people are exposed to photos and end up flagging them. These quizzes are also a great way to study for a new region. So yeah, we're just gonna do this to show you. Okay, maybe it's not gonna let me do that because okay, we'll put in Ada. So it has all these photos, and so then you can just it kind of just randomly selects photos that are of species that have been recorded in that region, which makes it's not necessarily the best studying tool. I personally prefer to study by doing quizzes, because I get kind of bored just like reading through a field guide. So I do this a lot, but there are better ways, but it's an option. And so then you select something, and then you also can flag the photos from there, which is just this like report button down here. And that's how most people come across misidentified photos, unless they're just happen to be scrolling through Macaulay library looking at photos like I was. Okay, I got a question. How did I get to this? I'm assuming you mean
The quiz, I
the
think.
quiz. Oh, okay. So it's under Explore, and then you just scroll down to the end and select photo and sound quiz, and then you can put in some parameters for the region and time. Let's see, some other things that I'll kind of just briefly go over. You can also explore hotspots for a region. So this is showing all the hotspots in the world, and then if we zoom in, you can enter a hotspot name and click on it and get to that hotspot profile. Or if you're like looking in a new region, maybe you want to discover some new hotspots, then you can also just look into it this way. And then if we go to one of these hotspots, we can click on it, and then we can get all this information for it. Some other things in the Explore. So bar charts, we've already gone over what bar charts are, but yeah, there's another place you can look at that. You can also you can get target species and alerts for there. So let's look at my target species for Idaho. And then you can select what you need those targets for. So I'm going to just do it as is. So this is going to give me a list of species that I've never seen in Idaho that are seen, that have been reported year round. And so then it's showing the frequency. So like how many checklists in this region contain this species. And so that's a really great way to get to know what birds you should be studying and what birds you should expect to see if you're planning on traveling. You can also get alerts, so you can get emailed when people have seen either birds that trip the rarity filter or birds that you haven't seen for a region. You can do this down to county level and broader. You can do it hourly or daily. A few different ways to customize that, and they'll get emailed to you. And so that's a good way to get notified as soon as possible about rare birds if you want to go chase them. With this, you can also look at your totals. So you can get totals for your yard. You can designate your own yard on eBird, and for your patch, which is just like a place that you go birding a lot, you can also designate in eBird. You can also look at the top 100s. So maybe let's look for Ada County. What it defaults to is showing the year. You can also look all time. And so that's just showing the top 100 birders in the county for this year. It'll automatically jump to you if it actually still displays your number if you're below 100. You just can't like scroll through the list and see. Well, you'll still be able to scroll through the top 100, but you can't scroll to where you are on the list. And you can also do all time or any other year. So there's that. That's more of a for competitive people thing, but it's kind of fun. Okay, and then one last thing I want to show you real quick is this science tab has quite a few different things that you can look through. One fun one is you can see these abundance animations. So snow goose is actually a really good one. So we're going to look at that. And so this is going to show you how birds are moving through the entire world over the course of the year. So relative abundance, so we see them as we go from yellow to blue, that's just more birds in that area. And then it's going to play it through the whole year so we can watch this. So we can see how these birds are migrating. This doesn't exist for all species because they have to have enough data to do it. And you can see some of this like dark gray is they're showing they don't really have enough information from this time period to really say. But yeah, these animations are super cool. So that's something that you can also look into. And this is what your eBird data is contributing to. This is some of the science, now we have this really great visualization of exactly how these birds are moving from the data that eBirders are submitting. All right. So that is most of what I have for this. Oh, I didn't need to go all the way out from there. Go back to this. So yeah, I'll take any questions now. I threw up some contact information for both myself and for Idaho Young Birders Club if you're interested in that. So I'll just leave that there while I'm answering questions in case anyone wants to write it down.
Thanks so much, Lucian. That was great and so informative and awesome. So we really appreciate this. I'm really excited that it's going to be recorded and linked to our website because I think it's just going to be a great presentation for people to refer back to or for people who couldn't make it tonight. So I just wanted to thank you for your time. And yeah, we're at 8:30, so I don't want to take too much more of your time, but if anyone has any last minute questions, now would be the time to ask them.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to give this. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, like I said, I really, I love eBird, and I also really want people to learn more about the review process, so it's a little less intimidating.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm definitely less intimidated knowing that it's you and Heidi and not just a person I don't know.
Yeah, and I think even people that don't live in the area where it's me and Heidi, your eBird reviewer is most likely just someone who's in your birding community who you might already know but might not know they're a reviewer.
Yeah, it looks like we're just getting lots of comments of how much people enjoyed it and thank you. So I don't think we really have any other questions, but I did just want to remind people that related to eBird, as Lucian already mentioned, the Great Backyard Bird Count is coming up later in February. So that's a great opportunity to engage with eBird and participate in community science. And we hope that you'll join our collective count, where our February monthly program is actually going to be kind of a Great Backyard Bird Count celebration, where we'll kind of reveal the collective results from everybody's checklists and do some kind of fun trivia about the backyard bird count. People can kind of talk a little bit about their counts. So it'll be a little bit more of an interactive social monthly program. So I hope you all will be able to join us. And someone wanted to know, how do you have time to go to school? I wonder that question too, Lucian. How do you fit all these things into your schedule? It's impressive.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for coming tonight. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your evening and hope to see you all soon.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.